Hello and welcome. You have realized tonight we are using a different intro because David Otto is back again as usual. But tonight he's going to talk about something very, very, very important. In fact, this problem is almost like a pandemic. Um, when you look behind me here, you will realize that Nigeria, or the citizens of Nigeria, they had enough of police brutality. In fact, it is not only Nigeria, but it is all over Africa. Africa has got a really serious problem with police brutality. Anyway, I am not going to waste much of your time. I'm going to hand you over to David. So, David,
Thank you very much, Mr. Joseph Otieno. Thank you for the viewers of Africans in London television. We want to appreciate your patience, but also for your persistence that we talk about this issue of police brutality, which we're going to have a dig at, today, this evening. We really want to again continuously, draw your attention to the fact that most of the topics, if not all of the topics that we're having on this program, is focused from your request, but also from the perspective of the agenda behind this program, which is talking about security updates in Africa and issues that impact on not just the security of Africa, but also on the socioeconomic peace and stability of the region. And that is why we bring you the best of specialists that come from the region, people that have extensive research knowledge, extensive academic backgrounds, practitioners' background, to give you, their best understanding and experience of the discussions that we're having. So we'll go straight to the point at which we have concluded to discuss today, which is police brutality. And as Mr. Joseph pointed out, police brutality is not something which is, peculiar to Africa. We've heard of the current Black Lives Matter movement, which began in America. There is police brutality in each and every continent. But we want to focus on what is happening in Africa, but specifically to the ongoing revolutionary movement, which is kind of unprecedented, that in a country like Nigeria, which is the elephant, I call it, of Africa, because of its population, but also because of its position within the continent, that the young people, the young generation, have come out at mass to demand for the end of a certain police unit known as SARS, which is Serious Anti-Robbery Squad. And they have put an enormous amount of pressure, which the president of Nigeria and also the Inspector General of Police has yielded to the call, and this unit has now been disbanded. It's been scrapped totally. But this is not the first time that SARS has been scrapped. Has been banned. And this is not the first time that Nigerians and citizens are calling for the end of police brutality. But the question that we want to really discuss today with our panelists is to find out whether the scrapping of SARS and the disbanding of SARS is actually the end of police brutality in Nigeria, and what the impact of that would be. So that is the crux of the matter. Does banning the existence, or actually scraping the existence of this unit and creating another one, which we will talk about during this program, does it have any impact on the aspect of brutality, which the citizens were complaining about? Again, as I mentioned, we still have ongoing protests as we speak. And the issue there is people, yes, could go to the streets for one particular reason, end SARS. But taking them out of the streets does not necessarily mean that by ending SARS, there is some kind of a satisfaction as to the original demands. So we'll have these discussions with our panelists this evening. But before we go to our panelists, let us listen to the remarks that were made by the President of Nigeria, Muhammadu Buhari, in regards to SARS itself. Mr. Joseph, do we have that video with us?
Say a word on the recent genuine concerns and agitations by Nigerians about the excessive use of force and, in some cases, extrajudicial killings and wrongful conduct by men of the Nigerian police force. The disbanding of SARS is only the first step in our commitment to extensive police reform in order to ensure that the primary duty of the police and other law enforcement agencies remains the protection of lives and livelihoods of our people. We will also ensure that all those responsible for misconduct or wrongful acts are brought to justice. We also deeply regret the loss of life of the young man in Oyo State during the recent demonstrations. I have directed that the circumstances of his death should be thoroughly investigated. Meanwhile, it is important to recognize that the vast majority of men and women of the police force are hardworking and diligent in performing their duties.
Mr. Joseph, let me introduce my guest. After that video, I want to have you to meet Mr. Christopher Samuel, who is an intelligence and security analyst. He has studied intelligence analysis, but also policing reform within the African context. I also have today with me Dr. Kabir Adamu, who is an African security analyst, who has spoken in many platforms, talked about security service reforms, police reforms, understand the dynamics of security within and outside the regions of Nigeria. But I also have with me today again Tanwa Ashiru, who is, has been a regular to this program. She's a former US military personnel, but also the CEO for an organization based in Nigeria called Bulwark Intelligence. Now, let me start with you, Tanwa. All of you here have... yes, Mr. Joseph.
Yeah, before we go further, I realized if we could turn down the volumes on the computer, because I can hear a lot of feedback.
Noise in the background?
Yeah, there is a lot of noise in the background. I don't know. If we can turn down the volume so that the speakers doesn't pick up all the sound. Since most of you are using headphones.
Yes. Yeah, so
is that better?
let me get... Yes, is that okay?
Well, continue. Not really, but
that's okay.
It is still there, but let us continue. Let's continue.
Okay, let me start with Tanwa Ashiru, because all of you here have had some form of interactions with, the government of Nigeria or other governments regarding policing. Would you have advised the government of Nigeria in this case to ban the SARS unit, Tanwa? And would you have advised them to ban it now against the existing pressure? I mean, I'll give you 2 minutes for that, and I'll ask the same questions to Mr. Chris and Kabir Adamu. Tanwa, go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks, David. Absolutely. This actually should have been done many years ago, which it was actually, many years ago. I think about 2 or 3 times now the Nigerian government has actually banned SARS, but then they keep just resurfacing again. So what this is showing is that the people who are banning this group obviously don't have any control over them. In fact, just in the span of this week, with all the protests that have been taking place, we're still seeing cases emerging with SARS operatives still harassing some citizens publicly in Nigeria. I believe the latest one that came out yesterday happened in Rivers State, and it happened in the middle of a public market. And and it was a SARS operative with his gun, and he was harassing the person there. So again, we've seen this time and time again. The Nigerian citizens put pressure on the government, and then they say, okay, they're going to ban SARS. They ban it with words, okay, perhaps maybe with a message too.
Yes, go ahead, Tanwa. I think your phone is on mute a little bit. I don't know. Yeah. Yeah, Tanwa, I think your phone is on mute. Can you I don't seem to hear you. While you're trying to adjust that, I'll come back to you. Mr. Kabir Adamu, can we get your views on this before we get back to Tanwa, because I think there was a technical issue there.
All right, thank you, David. First off, I would like to emphasize the point that the Special Anti-Robbery Squad is a tactical unit, and all over the world, in the police, in most policing arrangements all over the world, there are tactical units. Now, that means, for instance, it's not a strange thing for the Nigerian police to have a tactical unit. But then the question is, what went wrong? Why did this tactical unit become notorious for the kinds of brutality that it's been accused of committing? I mean, I'm here, and if you drive down to the headquarters of this unit in Abuja, the number of vehicles and the number of detainees that are in that particular unit would shock you. You would think you are actually in a car display center or some form of automobile show is ongoing, and the number of people. And let's not forget that in 2012, one of the terrorist groups in Nigeria, Ansaru, actually attacked the detention center of this particular unit, mainly because they felt people were being held there, unjustifiably, and they freed their members that were being held there. So yes, a tactical unit that has gone haywire, as it were. And why did it go haywire? I think the answer is in the management of the tactical unit. Those who created that tactical unit failed to put in place management measures that would allow that tactical unit to be effective and efficient. Do we have a challenge of robbery in Nigeria? Yes, we do have a challenge of robbery in Nigeria. But then the unit left its core mandate of tackling robbery and went into other mandates. I mean, I can catalog the kind of human rights abuses that the unit is being accused of. The most, I think, obvious one is, the patrols that it's alleged to have conducted, where it would stop people on the road, profile them on the basis of how they look, and then sometimes, abuse their privacy by collecting their phones. Accusations of even sexual violence, including rape, has been leveled against this particular, rogue element. Now it's been disbanded, but unfortunately, the issues surrounding the creation of that particular unit still remains with us as of today. So yes, I agree totally that even though the unit is necessary in the context of Nigeria, but unfortunately, the way it was created and how it was managed did not have proper control mechanisms to stop brutality and human rights abuses by that particular unit.
Thank you, Mr. Kabir. Christopher, would you have looked, into the eyes of the IGP and the president and said to them, based on my knowledge of why this unit was created in the early 90s, it has to go?
Thank you, Dave. Mr. Dave, I wouldn't have advised the government to disband the union at this time. I realize that the government in this case seems to have protrude to the public pressure to disband the group. But the problem with SARS are two problems, main issues. One is of what are called structural issues involving the caliber of maybe the recruit, the personnel that has been brought into the unit. These are people that are from a very low end of the society. They are not well trained. They are not well paid. So it's a structural issue with the caliber of people within the profile over to the unit. The second thing is the operational issues, in the sense that they've been allowed to overstretch their mandate. Their mandate is to deal with the violent robbery that was very rife in Lagos and the inner cities of Nigeria at some point in time. That mandate hasn't been achieved. In any other jurisdiction where the disbursement has taken place, is taking place solely on the premise that their mandate has been achieved. So there's no need to have that unit in place anymore. But in Nigeria, each case, the crime is still very rife. The mandate has not been achieved. So, I realized that maybe, okay, yeah, from the operational perspective, they've allowed the SARS to maybe snowball into something that is no longer desirable for the public. But at this present time, I believe that the government has just budged to the public pressure to disband the SARS. I believe that, a little bit of reform would have been ideal to maybe, to move the unit forward. Nigeria is currently besieged by different kind of maybe, high level of criminality. So I don't believe that maybe the disbandment of the unit is an ideal way forward at this present time, Mr. Dave.
Thank you very much, Tanwa. Let me get to you on the basis of that. I know you were cut short by your connections. The IGP and the president have made it very clear that SARS has been disbanded. What does that mean, especially when you consider the fact that in that same statement by the Inspector General of Police, they make it very clear that the personnel will be redeployed. Now, from a security perspective, the unit is made up of its personnel. And if you disband the unit and then you redeploy the personnel, are you just shifting from pillar to post? What's your take on that?
No.
I think you've got a problem with your phone. I don't know if you've muted it. But obviously, I think we can't hear you. Do you want to speak directly? Yes, I think we can't for some reason. But what I think you should do is, can you log in and log off and log in again? So let me get that question to Kabir while you're logging off and logging on again. The audience will excuse Tanwa for a minute. So, Mr. Adamu, let me ask you this question again. From what the IGP has said, SARS, of course, has been disbanded, but they will be redeployed. You understand from a security point of view that this is just moving personnel from one unit to another. Of course, it is made very clear that no SARS member will be part of this new SWAT, which will come to that. I mean, what is your take on this decision by the IGP to redeploy instead of maybe disbanding the members or removing them entirely? I mean, what's your take?
Well, first off, there are two, I think, premise of the reason for the action that I would like to mention. One of them is the perception by the average person on the street is that the only tactical unit in existence in Nigeria is the SARS, the Special Anti-Robbery Squad, when in reality there are several others. At the last count, I think there were about 14 tactical units in operation in Nigeria. So when these other tactical units commit any act, it is subsumed that it is SARS because of the notoriety behind that particular unit. So, responding to that public outcry, the Inspector General of Police disbanded that unit. But that means, unfortunately, all the other units too are in existence. Now, the operational procedures of the unit is not very different from the other tactical units in existence. Their personnel were trained by the same training institute that the police has. It's not that it has a special training center for members of that squad. No, they all go to the same training school and then they deploy them. Now, the disbanded members of SARS, what happens to them? They have the same mindset, the same training. Nothing really has changed about them. So they are going back into the system, even though a follow-up statement by the Inspector General of Police indicated that they are going to be debriefed and then they will be psycho-evaluated as well. Now, questions have arisen as to the capacity of the Nigerian police to conduct that debriefing, as well as to conduct the psycho-evaluation. Under the new Police Act, which was passed in September 2020, a special unit has been created for psychological evaluation and psychosocial support for police operatives. Now, nobody really knows, and I say this with all sense of responsibility, what is the capacity of that department? Can they conduct this debriefing in a manner that would reveal all the challenges affecting this personnel? And then, of course, the psychological evaluation. Will it reveal hidden issues within the system itself? So unfortunately, it seems we're going to have a situation where these operatives, who unfortunately over time have been accused of a lot of heavy-handedness and several unsavory issues regarding how they operated when they were with squad, are now back into the system, and with no credible way of removing that stain that is inside them. So the most likely thing is that they are going to remain within the system and continue, unfortunately, some of these actions that Nigeria faced wholly.
Thank you. Tanwa, how good is your line?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you very well. Thank you for that. Kabir has talked a bit about your question, but one of the things which I really wanted to ask you again is nobody knows the number of SARS members that were registered or that were deployed in the 36 states. How do you know whether whether the same SARS members will be going into the new squad, SWAT? Sorry. What's your take on that, Tanwa? How do you know? How does the public get convinced about that?
Yeah, so what I was saying initially was that, what we have is a case of problem has changed name. And we see that quite a lot in Nigeria. If people are worried about a specific name, you simply change the name of it, and then it seems like things are back to normal, but it clearly isn't. Now, with regards to even the police force or the HQ not even knowing how many SARS members are out there, that is actually the main problem that exists with SARS, is the fact that they have zero control over their personnel wherever it is that they are deployed. And let me explain this. Oftentimes you find that they set up illegal checkpoints. They just, they roam across the streets. No one's really tracking their actual locations. Normally, you should be able to track where specific law enforcement personnel are, so that if there is any kind of issue there, you know exactly who's in the area, and you can dispatch the nearest police officer or law enforcement personnel. Unfortunately, that doesn't happen with SARS. In fact, oftentimes when they tell you that, look, we're going to kill you and nothing will happen, they mean it. They're actually able to get away with that, and they have been for a long time now. So for the ability to not even know how many personnel you have, not be able to keep track with them, for you to ban them, and then they're actually still operating, and then you are the one that has to tell the citizens, hey, please let us know, if you see SARS operating. How is it our job to tell you about where your personnel are and what your personnel should be doing? So clearly, they've lost control over this unit for a long time, and it's starting to backfire quite a bit. That right there is the reason why the protests are still ongoing. Nigerians are saying it's not enough for you to ban them. What we need you to do is to call back everybody in. We need to see these SARS attacks stop. And we need you to prosecute those who fall, because till date, we've barely seen any public persecutions of any of these SARS members that have just taken lives. So these are part of the requests that the protesters are demanding for. Bring those people to justice. Let them face their crimes. Do psychological evaluation on them. In fact, remove them, especially those who have been guilty of homicide. Take them out of the force. So these are some of the requests that haven't actually been met yet.
Thank you for that. Chris, let me come to you. You've done a lot of work on policing, and you've got experience in Africa and in Europe. You've dealt with a lot of institutions of this nature. What is wrong with SARS? What is the problem with SARS? From a policing perspective, why do they behave the way they behave? Is it a problem of SARS alone, or Is it a problem of the Nigerian police in general, or both?
Yeah, I think it's the problem. It's both. Let me put it like that. First is the problem of Nigerian police, and then is the problem of SARS as well. Is the when SARS was created, I don't think that maybe the structure that the mandate that was given them is like maybe an open-ending check, plain check. Let them write their own rules and do whatever they want. I don't think that would have been an ideal thing for them to have done at that time. What they ought to have done is to like maybe give them a mandate within certain period, maybe 2 years or 3 years. After that, let them come back and then renew that mandate. Let the commander go to like maybe the select command of the internal affairs and then get the mandate to be renewed. When you want to renew your mandate, you need to like maybe make a case for your unit. Making a case for your unit, you need to be stating the kind of achievement that they have achieved, how many investigations they've carried out, how many people that they've arrested, how many people that have been tried, how many people have been incarcerated, how many robbery have been foiled over the past 2 years, to have that mandate renewed. That's the ideal way. That as the best way they ought to have maybe putting in place, but they didn't do that. So now you have the issue where people just mount roadblock, abandon their actual mandate, doing what the mandate doesn't cover, mounting roadblock, harassing innocent citizens, taking their mobile phone, said that they're looking for, they want to find out whether they're 419 or not 419. That is not their mandate. So what the government should have done is to maybe give them a specific mandate to stick to. Deal with the issue of violent crimes in Lagos involving robbery. Let them use all the like maybe necessary intelligence means and information to do that. And let them stick to that. If the mandate is going to be extended to any other thing, let it be published.
Yeah, no, thank you for that, Mr. Kabir. Let me get to you. I mean, there's one thing which a lot of people are talking about. I mean, I subscribe to the view that what is happening within the Nigerian police is to do with reform, or the refusal, or the inability for the police to be reformed. Now, we've seen an unprecedented decision by the president, by the Inspector General of Police, to disband a unit. And does this create a very bad precedent, or it creates a very good precedent? What happens next, in your opinion?
We have a very unique situation that unfortunately it appears we're missing out on, mainly because the image makers of the Nigerian government are not speaking about it. The person of the Inspector General of Police, IGP Mohammed Adamu, is unique. He comes from a breed of officers who are well educated. He was brought in from the highest academic research institution in the country, in the region actually, in West Africa. That is the National Institute for Policy and Strategic Studies, where he was deployed before he was made IG. And he's got that think tank behind him, supporting him. In addition, he's got a think tank of international non-governmental organizations that are being funded by the UK aid, as an example, and you say it, such as P1, Ford Foundation, Clean Foundation, and several others. They've been supporting the reform process that since he was made IG, he's attempted to introduce. Then beyond that, the current administration too has come up with some novel changes within the policing system in Nigeria. One of them is the introduction of the Police Act 2019, which unfortunately is currently controversial. We may talk about that in the course of the program. Then before that, we saw the introduction of the Anti-Torture Act 2017, also very important. Then there is also the review of Force Order 237. Now, that was the most controversial force order in the country because it allowed the use of force without delineating how that force would be used. It was also very vague on the principles of necessity as well as proportionality in the use of that force. So very, importantly, there was a review of that force order in October 2019. And then very recently too, there was the Police Trust Fund Act, which was passed by the Buhari administration. Now, if you're used to working in Nigeria, you realize that one of the greatest challenges affecting policing is funding. And so this trust fund is meant to tackle that particular issue. And it's modeled after the Lagos Security Trust Fund, which is really a very transparent process of gathering funding for the police and ensuring transparency in the use of those funds that were gathered. The members of that board were, and the chairman was inaugurated this year, and we're actually waiting for that fund to start working. So some very good platforms have been created to allow police reform. Unfortunately, like I said earlier on, the image makers of this government have not spoken about it. The wheels of government is also, unfortunately, very slow. So these changes appears to have been lost to a lot of Nigerians as well as international observers. But as from my position as an expert reviewer, I see opportunities there. And I'm hoping that with this, and especially with the person, Director General of Police, we would see him drive these changes through. Now, what has he done with regards to SARS in particular, and his attempt to ensure that whatever mistakes were made in the creation of SARS are not repeated? He's with a lot of, I would say, a template that would ensure that we do not go that route where you create a monster really, and that monster becomes what it is, a monster to the country. I think the kind of attention that the whole issue has created and the force of the End SARS movement is not only ensuring that, but it's also gingering him to do more of some of these things that I've mentioned. But clearly, there is a very good platform that would allow for a credible reform that would give us the kind of police that Nigeria deserves in 2020 and beyond.
Thank you for that. And that's a very good point, and points, of course, that you've made in terms of some of the endeavors which internationally, nationally have been introduced, especially by the current Inspector General of Police. But I'm wondering where the gear is getting stuck. Tanwa, do you know where the gear is getting stuck? Because all these reforms, all these endeavors that Dr. Kebi has talked about, these are things which I'm sure have been in existence for even before the current IGP of police. Of course, there are new endeavors, but why is nothing changing? And except, some of the negative news, or is it that people are not talking about the good things, and we're just hearing about the bad ones? Tanwa, I'd like you to have a go at that.
Yeah, so I think people are talking about what they're seeing. And, all these reforms and policies may have been passed, but, we all know Nigeria has a major problem with them. All right. So these things may be written on paper saying that this is the way we should go. But when it comes to actually implementing it, that is where we fall short. Implementation requires a couple of things. Number one, resources, funding. And like Dr. Kabir just said, resources are a major problem. Now, some people scratch their heads and they wonder why, especially because they've seen the security budget quadruple. And in the last 10 years already, it has quadrupled the defense and security budget. So we keep asking ourselves, why is there still an issue? Well, with resources. Well, this is where what hasn't been tackled, which is the fact that monies that are earmarked for certain functions never actually make it to those functions. This is when we talk about the endemic corruption, usually within institutions. This is a classic case of that. And I'll give you an example. I remember sitting next to, one of the senior police officers at a meeting, a business meeting that we all had. And I remember the CP, the Commissioner of Police for that state, was complaining. And he said, we don't even get enough money to run the police station. We only get about 35,000 naira every month. And for your viewers, 35,000 naira, if is way under $100, or I don't even know the current exchange rate these days, but you're looking at maybe $70 that they are given to run the police station in a month. $70. Like, how is that going to do anything? And I remember the police officer that was sitting next to me, he leaned over and he said, no, it's not true. And I was like, hey, obviously it can't be true. How can it be 35,000 naira? He goes, no, it's not true. It's 33,000 naira. So in essence, they don't have adequate funds to even be able to run their stations on a day-to-day basis, run it operationally. Now, the other issue we have with regards to policy, and the reason why we're not seeing it on the ground, also has to do with monitoring and evaluation. Those of us who are in this role that we play with business, we know that once you're given money for something and you are implementing it, you have to give feedback, you have to, and people have to monitor that situation, evaluate it to see if it's effective and if it's doing what it has been set out to do. So it's either the monitoring and evaluation portion of our implementation is not being conducted at all. Right now, we then have a case whereby we don't know if the monies that have been earmarked for certain projects are actually used for that project. We know for a fact that monies don't really get to the police stations, and oftentimes the citizens are the ones who have to buy equipment and things for the police. And so we also know, and there have been so many allegations that the policemen oftentimes have to go out and do these things that they're doing just to raise funds, not just for themselves, but in some cases for their higher ups as well. So again, these are all things that are institutional. And if we're saying that we're going to just scrap SARS, yeah, you may end this name. You may, put a couple of guys out of work temporarily. But what we're seeing is a case whereby these problems are still in place because we have not put these measures and these markers in place. So unless these things are put in place, we're just going to see a problem that just disappears for a little while and then resurfaces under a new name and, with a different type of energy, but the same issue.
Thank you, Tanwa, for that point. I don't want us to get to another point, which some of my viewers have raised. The point of how do you rebuild trust between the police in general and other units, including the new SWAT, which has been introduced. Let's remember that in 2009, the reason why we have it's not the main reason, but one of the reasons why we had the outbreak of the Boko Haram crisis in 2009 July was associated with the behavior of the police, how the police responded to the crisis, how they eliminated Mohammed Yusuf, who was the first founder of Boko Haram, things like that. And we understand, because a lot of us, all of us here have a very good understanding of the insurgency, that the primary target of Boko Haram at that time, between 2009, 2010, and 2011, was the police. Because, they blamed the police for the emergence of the crisis. Before then, you had the army, which came as a backup. Now you have a conflict which is being fought exclusively, or an insurgency which is being fought almost exclusively by the military. The police, plays a very limited role, if any, in terms of, a frontline engagement with Boko Haram. So, I was just trying to get your thoughts around the issue of understanding the deep-rooted roles that the police have played in Nigeria, and how there is actually no trust, even between the citizens. How do you rebuild trust, Mr. Adamu? How do you rebuild that trust that the people have lost? Do you think simply by saying we've changed SARS to SWAT, and exactly no member of SARS will be a member of the SWAT team, and people not knowing how many SARS members do exist? How do you rebuild that trust again, or is it lost?
Yeah, it's almost lost, frankly. And yet we need to rebuild it, because no society will exist really without a good policing system in place. So there's a need to rebuild that trust. The first thing is for the government to realize that that trust no longer exists, and is very visible from the NSAS protest and the fact that almost all their demands are being met, and yet the protest continues. It's very clear that there is a trust deficit between citizens and instruments of the state, including the police. Now, we're discussing the police, but again, this is not just peculiar to the police. It's a wider trust deficit between the citizens and government. But for the police, I would recommend three things. First one is the democratization of the police, which fortunately has already been started. I'll talk about that. The second point is proactive engagement by the police with citizens. And then the third one is strategic communication. Now, for the democratization of the police, last year in November 2019, the government launched what it called the revised National Security Strategy 2019. And in that document, it promised a paradigm shift from a state-centric approach to security to a citizen-centered approach to security. And as far as the police is concerned, I narrow my discussion of that document to the police. It promised that it was going to commence what it called community policing. And community policing will have elements of, a committee at the level of each community. The challenge in Nigeria is that you go to, I'm from a local government as an example, and you go to that local government for the purpose of listeners who don't understand the political structure in Nigeria. There is the federal government, the state government, and then the local government. So in my local government, as an example, where we probably have up to 500,000 or more people, you go there and at best you find 5 or less than that security agencies. And then you have a situation where bandits on 100 bikes arrive at location and they do what they want for hours and nobody responds to them. So community policing is meant to take care of them, where these committees, as well as constables that will be recruited from within members of that community, would form the community policing model that the government intends to implement. And so there will be an intelligence-led approach to policing where issues are noticed at inception and then they are addressed at that before they blossom into bigger challenges. So that's an attempt to democratize policing. The second point I talked about is proactive engagement, which would require the government meeting members of society that can contribute to policing, as it were. And so we're seeing elements of that which the government has begun. But unfortunately, it's still at a very early stage. And I hope that the kind of vigor that I'm seeing them pursue it would continue all the way, so that Nigerians will now have some semblance of confidence within the system. And then, of course, the last one is strategic communication, which, if you ask me, is almost completely missing from the government process at the moment. In summary, these 3 things I think would help rebuild confidence. The use of force, which unfortunately the focus of the implementation of the security strategy believes in, and we need to remember that the state is one of repression, unfortunately, and is using the police as an instrument of that repression. So force is not only encouraged, it is used, brazenly.
Thank you for that. Let me bring Tanwa in and then come to Chris. Now Tanwa, from an intelligence perspective, you and I know that there is no police that can survive without the community, without getting information from the community. The community comes first. Now we have a scenario. It's not general, but we have a scenario whereby disproportionately people don't, believe in the police. And how do you then try and rebuild that from an operations perspective? How do you get people to give information to the police when, the police is seen as a problem itself? What are the practical ways to go about that, Tanwa? Tanwa, sorry, I lost you again. The voice thing again. I'm sure that yes.
Yeah, sorry.
You're gonna get back. Yes, go ahead, Tanwa.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so it may sound simple, but it's really just from the police doing their job. We see it time and time again. I think there's a unit in Lagos, and it's the RRS, the Rapid Response Squad. And they typically are the ones that immediately respond to any kind of emergencies. And they have pinned down locations across the state. So oftentimes when there is a robbery, when there's an incident going on, Lagosians are easily able to call the emergency phone number. And from the control center, they are able to dispatch the closest rapid response squad in the area to respond. And because of that, you find that Nigerians are very sympathetic towards the RRS. As you see, they're not protesting against RRS, right? But they do see them everywhere. Why? Because these are sort of they've been packaged almost like the good guys, because they show up and they do their jobs. They show up and they help. They show up and they try to solve the problem that's at stake. In fact, oftentimes, even when they just see a person who's wandering around lost, or just they show random acts of kindness, and these things are then shared on social media as well, and it just sort of generates that endearment even more towards not just that unit, but even towards the Lagos State Police. So again, I think that, and citizens, Nigerians are they're just asking for one thing. Can we just see results? Can we just actually be safe and just not constantly be killed? If they're not being killed by the criminals, they're being killed by those who have been tasked to actually protect them. Again, so this is one way that trust can be built, is just by going out there, doing good, showcasing it, like Dr. Adamu said, just social media, strategic communications. I know there are a couple of units within the police force that really have tried to harness that as much as possible. We've worked very closely with some of these units, and people recognize that as well. So if the police is going to build this trust, the Nigerians need to be able to see that they're actually showing up in places where insecurity is rampant. They're seeing a reduction in crime and insecurity in these areas as a result of the presence of the police forces. And then, people will be more willing to come out with information, especially if they see that that information is resulting in a reduction in crime and insecurity. So it sounds very simple, but really that is the simple plan. Can we build our police force to be such a force that can adequately respond to the security challenges, and that Nigerians can recognize that and celebrate them for that?
Thank you for that. Now, I think one thing which we've got to, talk about, which I want Chris to really dig into. A police officer might be sitting there, or a member of SARS that has been disbanded, might be sitting there and thinking to themselves, but this is not my fault. I mean, the welfare system is really bad. We've heard of stories where police officers use their own personal funds, to run affairs of the state. Their dressing is deplorable. I mean, their professionalism is almost at its lowest. How do you advocate for a police reform? I mean, what do you see, Chris, where you can say, this is where the problem really begins, rather than where the problem occurs? So where do you think the problem begins from that angle?
The problem begins,
Chris,
Mr. Davis, is the management of the police, is the outlook of the police, is the way they do things, is the way they respond to things, is their professionalism. Everything has been called to question. So, personally, Mr. Dave, the police are going through like maybe the divorce process with the general public in Nigeria, and then for people to start taking them serious again, they need a complete makeover. Things need to start. They need to start doing things properly. The government over the years, like that gentleman said, Dr. Kabir, they've not managed the police force department the way it ought to have been managed. Most of the funds are allocated to them are be swindled away, by the top officials. So if there's going to be reform needs to start from the top to bottom, rather from the top bottom. You need to like maybe be able to hold most of the people sitting at the head office in Abuja who are responsible for like maybe disposing all these funds. There needs to be like maybe a third arms, maybe like what we have in the UK, the police complaint commissions who can look into the affairs of the police, how it's being managed. What are the funds that are the annual budget allocated to them? What has been done with it? How has been been disbursed? Among the police department in Nigeria, and then to be able to be on top of things. Because I mean the issue that we have now, is the nature of the recruit. Nigeria police doesn't attract the best. You barely find anybody that has been to like maybe Oxford or Cambridge that want to go back to Nigeria and join Nigerian police. Nigerian police, as is in the current state, attract crooks, ex-renegade, ex-criminal. They are just looking for safe ways. They reform the criminal that don't want to commit crimes on the mainstream anymore. Thinking that maybe if they join the police force, that they can be collecting money from the roadblocks. So those are the caliber of people that the current state of Nigeria police attract. The best brain that are there sit in Abuja, and they just sit on the money. So if any reform is going to take place, and people if they need to engage with the public needs to start taking them serious, then reform needs to start from the top to bottom. They need to show, they need to start showing the public that this is a serious department. The hard look needs to show it. It's not just talking about it on the media that we're going to implement this. There's action speak louder than word. People need to know that the outlook of Nigerian police has changed. It's changed, that they are now about serious business, not the way business has been run over the years.
Yeah, thank you for that. Mr. Joseph is going to come in, but Mr. Joseph, just one a question so you can come in. I just want to get this off my mind. Kabir, this comes to you. From an operations perspective, when you disband and you scrap a unit, there are implications of that. There are ongoing cases. There are ongoing, positions that they maintain. There are ongoing, so many things happening at the background. How do you just stop that? And what do you think? Was it that bad in such a way that, a loophole had to be created? Or how do you feel that?
Well, I mentioned that the challenge with the tactical unit is the management of it. And so it will shock you that probably a catalog of, the cases they were handling probably will not even exist. Recall that we had a federal special anti-robbery squad, and then it was decentralized, where you now had state, special anti-robbery squads. And Nigeria, this is my country and I operate here. I'll be surprised really if there exists a central database where these cases are, cataloged, and it will be easy, for instance, to transfer them to another unit to carry on with those investigations. Most of the times, the kind of incidences we see, investigations that are being conducted at the personal level, probably without the knowledge of the central unit, either at the state level or at the federal unit. So, a new issue has been created. Some people whose rights, I mentioned that if you go to the Abuja SARS office, you probably you think you are at some automobile show because of the number of vehicles that are there. And I know that there are several people in the detention centers. So a lot of parents, a lot of loved ones are missing, quote and unquote. And unfortunately, they've not been documented into the police database. And so the unit no longer exists. And the question is, what happens to these properties and these people that are being held by this unit? And so, that's an area that the police leadership has been silent about. And I'm hoping that in the coming days, coming weeks, individuals like you, civil society organizations would raise this question so that answers can be gotten for them. But one easy way to do that is to go to the detention centers and document these cases in a transparent manner. The National Human Rights Commission has the mandate to do that. But in itself, it also has a challenge, because the governing board of that council has not been inaugurated by the government. And I know that that's one of the issues that is currently being discussed. So perhaps if that National Human Rights Commission becomes effective, it can visit those detention centers, document those persons in detention, those properties that have been held by this unit, and then start a process of simple term here is reconciliation. Reach out to Nigerians and ask Nigerians to come and own what was theirs and has been taken over by those units, and then find a way to compensate them for their rights and civil liberties that have been trampled upon over the last 3-4 years by this unit.
Yeah. Just tell me 1 minute on this. How do you just stop an ongoing investigation that a SARS member has been carrying out, and the next day they've been disbanded? How do you stop that, and what's the implication of that?
Well, I mean, it's definitely going to be significant, because at this point, we don't know if there are even actual legitimate cases that they have of real armed robbers who they had apprehended. But, ideally, when you apprehend criminals, or when you apprehend any kind of persons that you take in, you're supposed to actually put them in the record, enroll them in the system. And so it's there. And so even from the federal level, all the way to the state headquarters, everyone is tracking at the same time. Unfortunately, this unit we're talking about did not operate in that manner. Everything was done on a very, very local scale. And what that meant was, me and my 4 guys who are out here are going to arrest people. We may take them back to our HQ. We'll get some money from them, and then we'll release the guys or the victims that we've arrested. release them, and we share the money. And so at that point, those cases never even reach any kind of documentation. They never reach the HQ or anything. So right now that you're disbanding this group and you're transferring it somewhere else, or you're going to look at the case files to see what you can transfer to the federal police level, they may not find that many things. Perhaps, hopefully, the real criminals had been enrolled in the system and it can be carried on from the force headquarters level. But if not, we're going to see a lot of these criminals back on the streets, which could then pose its own challenges as well. And then but hopefully, um, like Kabir said, the police leadership has been a little silent about this. Their plan, they're agreeing to the terms, is not really digging past the surface to really tell us exactly how they're going to do these things. Remember, implementation is always a challenge, but we have to watch and see how that's going to play out.
Let me have Mr. Joseph, because Mr. Joseph has a question to put across. Mr. Joseph, do you want to go ahead? Yeah, Mr. Joseph, it seems as if we can't hear you as well. Do you mind if you? Yes, go ahead, Mr. Joseph. Yes.
I had muted myself. I think now you can hear me, can't you?
Of course, yes. Go ahead.
Right. Okay, we have got 4 minutes to end the program, but one thing really I would like you guys to look into. I have never understood why the police in Africa is underpaid, because this problem that you are talking about, it is not really a Nigerian problem only. It is Uganda, Kenya, South Africa, everywhere you look in Africa. And this problem you are talking about, catching some guys and then taking money, this goes on everywhere in Africa. Why do you think that the police in Africa is underpaid, the police department? Is this lack of respect from the government? What is it?
Chris, I'd like you to take that, because you've done something of that nature. Go ahead, Chris.
Well, I mean, the reason why they're underpaid is very strange, and I don't understand it. Because let me take, for example, in Nigerian context, the number of the police force in Nigeria in the ratio to like maybe the general population of Nigeria, which is almost about 180 million. The total number of Nigerian police force is in the region of almost about maybe 300,000-400,000, and they're still not well paid. So in the context of the UK, when you have a smaller police unit, it's because you want them to be well paid. When you want them to be well managed, you want them to be representative of the general public. But when you now have a smaller unit in Nigeria, at the ratio of maybe one officer to almost about maybe, I don't know, about 55,000 citizens, it's like putting like maybe a teacher in a classroom of almost about 2,000. As then you want a teacher to manage 2,000 children at the same time. So I don't think they have they have not the leaders, the political leaders, that have not given the due respect that the police deserve to have. They're not giving it to them. So that reflects the nature of like maybe the pay structure. You understand? And then if they are not well paid, it doesn't attract the best people. It's just as simple as that. So the current the police system that we have now in Nigeria is not fit for purpose. It's just there, so that people can know that they have a police department, but the police department do nothing.
Thank you very much, Chris. And as Mr. Joseph said, he doesn't understand why the police in Nigeria, the police in Africa, they behave the way they behave, and why they don't get paid. I think it's all about an issue of culture and the some kind of maybe there has been a culture whereby the police has been seen to be corrupt in such a way that the government probably thinks if we pay them, of course they're still going to make money off the streets. So I don't know if that is the official thinking, but which is not. But there has to be a change in terms of the professionalism of the police. There has to be a change from the recruitment process. And there has to be a change in terms of the training, change in terms of the discipline, and all these issues that my specialist guests have discussed today. I think we really need to see how African governments can really benefit from this, because the police is something which cannot be changed. You cannot do without the police. So we have to find a way. African nations have to find a way that they can establish a platform of trust between the citizens and the police. And all these recommendations that have been made, I think, they are very key. And we hope that we would find more time to look into this. We'll find more time to talk about this discussion. I really want to appreciate my guest. Ending SARS does not necessarily mean to end police brutality. It means to end police brutality, we need to carry out some structural and systematic changes within. I think it's a matter of a police culture. It's a matter of the will of the states. So let's see. We can come back to this topic again. I just really want to appreciate Tanwa Ashiru, the CEO of Bulwark Intelligence, Mr. Christopher Samuel, an intelligence analyst, and also Dr. Kabir Adamu, who is an African security analyst. I really appreciate your views. Thank you, Mr. Joseph. Thank you for our viewers. And I really want to appreciate all your questions that you send. Please keep sending more questions. And we would bring back the guests again. We look forward to having them in the nearest future. Thank you, Mr. Joseph. Over to you.
Oh, thank you very much. A very, very, very interesting topic. I wish we had. We might actually have maybe to create a subdivision of this topic, because when you look at police brutality, when George Floyd was killed, this term police brutality actually came to the fore, but it did not extend enough, because I can guarantee you the police brutality in Africa probably is worse than the United States. This one, I can actually say that. You see, in the United States, the white police Americans, they concentrate on antagonizing the blacks. But in Africa, what even surprises me more, I cannot really understand to see a fellow African antagonizing a fellow African. And what is even more surprising is that the police does not antagonize the middle class. They're actually on the street antagonizing people who have got no means of even taking care of themselves. And probably the people in the uniform, they actually believe that they possess the power. I really want you guys to look into this serious problem. Because in Kenya, the young children of 13 years old, being shot on the doorstep. In South Africa, just a few months ago, a 13-year-old boy, in fact, a disabled guy, I think he was with Down syndrome, he got shot, he got gunned down, and then you have got the police actually demolishing people's houses. I do not understand, where is the authority and where do they get the orders, because they cannot act on their own orders. I think that's what I need you guys just to look into, the structure of the police. Africa-wide, because the problem you have in Nigeria, I can guarantee you, if you look at Kenyan newspapers, Ugandan newspapers, they're equally the same. But I applaud you guys, because you come forward and talk about these problems. But we Kenyans, Ugandans, or whatever, we do not come out and talk about these issues academically. Because we live in fear. You see, you have got people who fear the police even when they are not at home, because they believe that if I say anything about the police, as soon as I get there at the airport, maybe I will be in danger. So I feel that really Mr. David Otto, he has to bring you again, but this time we look at the structure of the police in Africa. I think that would help. So Until on that
Thank
note,
you.
I must say thank you very much for coming onto to the program. I know we had a little challenges again with technology, but we are getting there. We are getting there.
Everyone.
Now, guys, as you have heard all these guys, I always keep saying that the conversation does not stop here. The conversation must continue on Facebook, and the video will be available on YouTube. So the conversation has to continue on social media. Send us your ideas. If you have got questions that you want to fire to the guys, please do. They know what they are talking about. You can, tonight you can actually see I'm using a different kind of intro because this matter have been waiting to discuss it. And for now, let us end here. Until next time. Thank you.